In this video, I want to tell you about my own personal experience dealing with circular reference in project finance models. So a friend of mine asked me a question about circular reference. I don't want to mention her name because I didn't get her permission, but she asked me a question about circular reference in project finance models, and I thought of making a video about it and explain to you my own experience working and dealing with circular references in a project finance model. So when I first started building financial models back in 2007, it was a long time ago, the purpose of the models were mainly for training because I was involved as a trainer in the executive programs in investment appraisal and risk analysis. And the model template, the case studies that we were building for the training purpose did not include any circular reference. So we're fixing that so that it's going to be easier for the participants to understand, to build the model, and to focus more on the concepts rather than the model mechanic. It was only in 2011 when I started my real job as a financial modeler, as a consultant for the African Development Bank, building, reviewing financial model. That was for the first time that I had to deal with circular references in projects. So the first encounter was basically my first project with the African Development Bank, which I was engaged in the project to build a parallel model for an existing financial model. So the sponsors were already submitting a financial model which was audited and reviewed and used throughout the process. And by the time I got engaged in the project, there was a need for a minimum revenue guarantee mechanism, and that required a Monte Carlo simulation. However, the existing model contained blocks of copy and paste, which was taking a long time to run only one simulation. So imagine running like thousands of simulations to get the Monte Carlo simulation was almost impossible. So that's when I was engaged to build a model, more simplified version of the model, and run the Monte Carlo simulation. And that was basically interesting that my first encounter with such a technique was kind of made me realize of the limitation of copy and paste. But however, when I started building models myself at the time, I did not, think about any other way of solving the solution. I knew that there is a problem with the copy and paste, but I just took it as given. I started also building copy and paste into my models, and I was very proud of it. That's the thing, that I still use copy and paste, but at the time when I was, writing my first code, the copy and paste code, I did first of all the recording, and then I got into the code. It was my first time that I was getting into the VBA editor, and it was all, new to me, so I was very kind of proud of my copy and paste code, and I was attaching buttons to the model, calling it optimization. And now when I think about it, I tell myself, what kind of optimization is that? If you're just copying a line and, pasting it as a value, I don't think that's an optimization. And eventually, this was working well for a while, and until I kind of started getting engaged more complex deals and had to build models that could reflect the complexity in projects like debt sizing, debt sculpting. And that's when I realized, that I hit the wall, as Professor Edward Butner says. I hit the wall at that stage, and I understood that there is something that is just limiting my models. I can no longer use the goal seek. I can no longer use the data table. If I want to use them, I need to create another macro that can call the copy and paste and then run the goal seek. So at that point, I started seriously looking into a solution for this problem, an alternative for copy and paste. And because they say when you're faced with a problem, either you find the solution yourself or you find someone who can solve the problem for you. In my case, I came across, when I did my research, I came across Professor Edward Bodmer's website. And I remember the first time that I saw his website, I was so amazed by the materials that he was like, making available for free to the public, that I remember I was up all night, downloading all the materials, just like I was thinking that I don't want to miss it if tomorrow these templates and these materials are not there. And up to this date, the materials are all online, and he's keep on adding and adding to it. So when I went through his materials and YouTube videos, I realized that he has a solution for this issue, and he has found an alternative for the copy and paste. So I started really reading, watching, reading his book and watching his YouTube videos, following line by line what he's saying, and I understood the concept that what he's proposing is to build a user-defined function under the VBA, which can basically replicate all the functions and calculations that you have in your Excel that are causing the circular reference. And then this function, you can add it into your model, and it's going to break the circular reference, and you do no longer need to do a copy and paste. So that was, amazing for me, but I really tried. I tried several times to apply it in my own models, which I was using on day-to-day basis, but I was not successful. So that's when back in 2018, I had the chance to have a face-to-face training with Professor Edward Bodmer in Istanbul, where he showed me, he made me write the UDF, the user-defined function, from scratch. And so that kind of made me understood the whole concept, and it made it a lot easier for me to understand and grasp the technique. And by the end of this training, it was a 3 days training, I had basically the code, the engine installed in one of my real models that I was using. So I used the code, and at the time I only needed to break the circular reference for the funding plan, for the sources and uses of fund plan. So it was a kind of like a mini kind of UDF, which was only dealing with the funding section of the financial model. And so that worked out for me quite well. I used it for a number of years, almost 2 years. I had the same UDF in my model. For time to time when I was involved in a new project, I was able to kind of make tweaks and make changes and, add variables and add equations even, and, get the result. And it was working quite well. But then it was just like 3 years ago, which I hit the wall for the second time, because then I realized that when I'm faced with issues like multiple tranches of debt and, with the different debt terms and sculpting and debt sizing, and also because I work more mainly in renewable sector, we have all this additional complexity regarding the renewables. And that's when I realized that I need another session with Professor Edward Bodmer to add, additional modules to the code and be able to address all this additional complexity that I was facing at the time. There was also a kind of technical issue as well that I faced with the code, and which was that I could no longer add additional variable because there is a limited number of variables that you can add. So in terms of the characters for the code. So I also had that limitation, and I realized that I need another session with Professor Edward Bodmer. At that time, I could just say that, and now I can say that I have the honor to call Professor Edward Bodmer Ed, and to consider him as my friend and as my mentor. So I knew that because we were still, exchanging, and I knew that he is working on an extended version of the UDF, which was including all this complexity. And so when we sat down together, it was online because it was during the pandemic, so early pandemic, when just the pandemic started. So he showed me the code, he took me through the code and showed me all the modules, but he understood that, it is too complex for me. I even, told him that your code looks like modern art to me. And, that's when he realized that, okay, so it seems that, she cannot process the information, because one thing that you need to understand is that Professor Edward Bodmer's brain works 10 times faster than my brain. So he understood, that he needs to do something about it so that me and other people can also grasp and use the technique. So he came to me one day and said, Hedieh, I know that you and Kenny and other people, they have a certain way of building their financial models. They have input sheets that they have, sometimes they separate. Sometimes you separate your constant inputs from your time-based inputs. Then you have a number of calculation sheets, and then you present your results, financial statements, and your dashboard and your summary sheet. And he showed me the new restructured code, which was actually mimicking the exact same thing. So he told me that, listen, now the code works exactly like your model. Here you come and you just define your variables, and then you go and you work out your equation, and then you present your results. So this way of like breaking down the code into modules enabled me to kind of understand it better, because I was kind of familiar with that way of doing things. And so we started, integrating and at that time, because the code was, the function was so complex. Complex, I mean, it was containing basically the main calculation blocks that are in a typical project finance model, and even more than a typical one. It has also some specific things that, we kind of encountered during our review of the UDF together, that, it became so comprehensive, let's say, that's the word, comprehensive, that he called it parallel model, because these two sheets that are sitting in the financial model are basically replicating all the calculations that are done in the model, and they're going to solve the circular reference issue that are faced in the model. So basically that's where we are now, and we, as I told you, we started inserting the UDF and the parallel model in real project finance model. Some of them were my models. We also contacted some other people which are like, leaders in the field of financial modeling nowadays. They also provided their model templates to us, and we inserted it into the model together with them. And we realized that this thing is really working. So that's why Professor Edward Bodmer and I, we organized a webinar, it was 1 month ago, where we presented, the technique, and we kind of he explained to you how the technique works and what it addresses, the issues that, people are facing, and how the parallel model can help to sort them out. So, and we're going to do more of this kind of webinars, but if you are also interested, please, let me know, let Professor Edward Bodmer know, and we can have maybe a one-to-one session and see what are your needs, and see whether this technique can also help you with the issues that you are facing with project finance modeling. So that's it for me. I hope you're not disappointed, because I didn't basically teach you anything, or the purpose was mainly to share with you my own experience, and I hope that I can encourage you with this video to kind of go and have a look at the parallel model, download it, play with it, insert it in your models, and see how it, just give it a chance. Even myself, in my models, I always include the copy and paste and allow the user to switch in between copy and paste and the parallel model. And even Professor Bodmer has included a switch in the parallel model, which you can turn it on and off, and so that, if you don't need it, you can just turn it off and on and go back to copy and paste. So there are so many other things that I cannot cover here, but this was just a glimpse, and that's it for me for today. I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you and bye. If you want to learn how to build better financial models, check out my online course on financial model spreadsheet design at courses.phoenixmode.com.